Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity to address you today and present some of the findings from research study that we've done in South Africa, and include some reflections from South Africa. I would like to say good morning to all the colleagues in South Africa that's also joining us today here, as well as the new colleagues that I've met in Turkey and everyone. And it's a great honor for me to present here today. Just to give you a little bit of background about myself. My name is Marlies Kuman. I am a professor at the Department of Criminology and Sciences at the University of South Africa. Now, the University of South Africa is an open distance learning university, meaning that our classes is done predominantly online. So I know you spoke about having a large university, but we think at this stage, under direction about 800,000 students at our university with multiple departments and colleges. So we are really an international university, having a lot of students from Africa as well as international students. So just to put this project into context, basically this is one of our community engagement projects. So within the university, we've got, in each college, we've got what we call community engagement projects. So that is specific research projects that deal with communities, and that where we do research where problems within a community is identified. Now, the engagement project that we are within this research falls is the one that deals with childhood substance use and addiction. So it is my privilege today to present you with some of the findings that we found within our first preliminary exploratory study. So just to put it into context, if I talk about a child is defined as any person or individual under the age of 18 years in accordance with South African law. So, and the rationale that underpins this project is basically that we recognize that childhood is a critical period where behaviors can become established, but it's also a time where you can develop resilience against behaviors associated with the use of psychoactive substances. So also, if I talk about psychoactive substances, I include both alcohol and drugs. And so just to put it into context. Going back, there we go. So starting off with this project, the first question that we ask ourselves is, what do we know about childhood substance use, abuse, and addiction? So research tells us, first of all, that it's a matter of global concern. And information about that can be found in the UNODC 2024 World Drug Report, as well as the World Health Organization 2024 report on the global status of alcohol and of treatment of substance use disorders. So it's a well-recognized fact. So the second thing that we know is that psychoactive substance use before the age of 15 is a strong predictor of a substance dependency and then problems later on during adulthood. Also, we know that early onset of substance use could result in physical, psychological, behavioral, developmental deficits, including school dropout, depression, and suicide attempts, or suicide in some instances. But it's also linked to increased risky behavior, specifically associated with delinquency, risky sexual behavior amongst children, and a high risk of exposure to violence as well as sexual victimization. So, but also the positive part is what we recognize is that research shows us that prevention and early intervention is a very good strategy if you want to build resilience in children. And I won't say we will always be able to prevent children from using substances, but to sort of mitigate the risk as well as try to the age at which they start using substances, to make that a later age instead of as early as we note in South Africa at the moment. So in South Africa, there's very limited information in general regarding substance use in children. So predominantly we get our statistics from statistics about admissions for treatment, such as the ones that's provided by the South African Community Epidemiology Network on Drug Abuse, or SACENDU, which is the South African affiliate of PISA, which I think you are more aware or familiar with. So statistics for the first 6 months in 2023, which also generally reflect patterns of substance use in or patterns of treatment for substance use disorders in children, indicate that there was a prevalence for the use of different substances amongst patients under the age of 18 years old. With cannabis being the most common substance for which children require treatment, and that's the primary substance, then it is followed by alcohol, not methamphetamine actually, then alcohol, and then heroin and cocaine, which is then your poly use, and cannabis mandrax, which we call the white South Africa, that's also your poly use, and cat to some extent. So this is the indication of the treatments that children require, or the substance that children require treatment for in South Africa. But what we find in the study that we've conducted is that this is not a true reflection of what's going on in South Africa in terms of substance use. And I will speak a little bit about it in more detail. So where the project originates from. Now, SANCA, which is a South African National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, approached when they started in 2022, basically that there is a big increase in the number or the need for treatment for children aged 14 to 17 years, and also then for children as young as 4 to 13 years. Now, the statistics that I've got here is basically, they've noted that 28% in treatment admissions for children 4 to 13 years, and then 50% amongst children aged 14 to 17 years. And based on that, and because of their vision, they like to make use of research informed practice, they approached us and asked us if we would like to become involved in a research project that we start exploring what factors is driving this change in the demographics of children that needs treatment for substance use disorders. So just to give you a little bit of background about the research project. So the overarching aim of the project is to develop a comprehensive strategy for addressing childhood substance use, abuse, and addiction, both proactively and reactively. It's a longitudinal project, which only started last year. So for the first research that we did in 2023, which was literally just an exploratory study. So the purpose of that study was not to generate generalizable findings or representative findings of the South African childhood population, but rather just for us to explore to find out exactly what is going on within the landscape, if I can call it like this. So for that sample, we had 484 children between the age of 10 and 18 years old who receive prevention and or treatment services from SANCA nationally. Now, SANCA is an NGO, and what they do is nationally in South Africa, they present programs to children in communities, wherever the need is. And then their focus is very strongly on prevention. So the sample that we draw our data from was general children from communities. So we did not specifically target children who use substances already. Then if you look at the demographics, it was about 65 or 56% male, 43% female, 1 non-binary. For data collection, we made use of a youth voice approach. What literally means is that we use a self-administrative survey to ask the children what are their experiences in terms of substances and substance use within their environments. So for us, using a youth voice approach is very important, because often what happens is research is collected from adults or from professional people working with children, and we often neglect getting the voices of children and hearing their opinions. So as I say, the sample consists of children that both use and did not use substances. And it was very interesting to get the information from children that do not use substances, to hear their perceptions in terms of what they think, why do the children use substances, what kind of substances they use. And we found that information also very valuable. So data analysis was done by SPSS. Statistically, the method that we used were mixed methods, but I'm only going to report on some of the quantitative findings today. And then obviously ethical clearance was obtained first of all from the University of South Africa, specifically the College of Law's Research Ethics Review Committee. And then informed consent was obtained from all the parents of the guardians, and then also assent from the children to participate in the study. So if you're interested in the methodology, you're more than welcome to later on engage with me, because I know some of our academics are very interested in the nitty-gritty of methodology, while practitioners find it quite boring sometimes. So, but that's just a little bit of background information. So starting off with the first critical finding. Now, the first critical finding from the study was, as mentioned, that statistics reflecting the substances children receive addiction treatment for is grossly underestimated in South Africa. As we would like to say in South Africa, it's the tip of the hippopotamus ears. So, and what generally happens is that prevention initiatives are geared to deal with the reports and the statistics regarding the substances that children receive treatment for. And if we look at this graph, then we say that this is not a true representative. So first of all, I want to say that in terms of our sample, the majority of children who participate in this study, namely 55%, and if we take that the sample, the largest segment of the sample was between the ages of 12 and 17 years. So 55% of those children indicated that they they experimented with alcohol, or even that they frequently use alcohol. And what was also shocking for us, although a little bit less, 44% acknowledging using some form of psychoactive drugs. So that, for a start, for us was quite shocking to realize how prevalent the use of one or another form of psychoactive substance is in children under the age of 18. So the reasons why we think there might be a difference between the statistics of children that receive treatment and the statistics that we found is that, first of all, that many children who use psychoactive substances do not need treatment at the end of the day. So that's the first treatment. But still, that does not negate the harm that the use of psychoactive substance at such a young age can cause to a child's brain development, physical development as well. So, and the second reason is that many children who might require treatment do not have access to the treatment due to coming from marginalized communities, and then due to social economic inequalities, they just do not have access to treatment. So that's also a reason why we thought the statistics might differ. So I think that the conclusion that we came to is basically basing prevention interventions on addiction treatment statistics is flawed, because it does not actively reflect what is going on within communities and the lived realities of children. And accurate data is very important, because if you want to develop a prevention strategy, if you do not target the correct substances, you're going to lose your audience, and it's going to have no impact at the end of the day. So the second interesting finding was that childhood substance use patterns is basically that the most frequently consumed substances was first of all alcohol. That was then followed by nicotine. So nicotine in the form of hubbly bubbly, book, I think she saw, I think, water pipes. Yes, I think we saw a lot of people using water pipes in Turkey. And then also vaping and cigarette smoke. So nicotine was a big problem. Then that was followed by cannabis and surprisingly codeine. So you codeine in the forms of pills and lean. I don't know, are you familiar with lean? What lean is? Okay. Lean is basically cough syrup containing codeine that children mix with cold drinks, fizzy cold drink, like Sprite, Coke, or whatever, and then they add the sweets in it to improve the taste, and they drink it. And it is actually a very inconspicuous way for children to use substances, because if a child walks with a bottle of cold drink, who's going to ask what's in it? So that was also an interesting finding for us. And then if you have a look, methamphetamine is a big problem in South Africa as well, but there was only 7% of children reporting it, then 4% cocaine, inhalants and ecstasy, and then the rest was 2 and 1%. So
what is Mandrax?
Mandrax is also a pill, and I will Google exactly what the ingredients is of Mandrax, but it's psychoactive. No problem. It's a psychoactive. Yeah. Yes, that's the big word I was looking for. Yes. So these are basically the substances that we found that the children we use. So if you look at these substances, alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, to a large extent, I don't know what is the legislation in Turkey. We tried to find out in terms of cannabis, but recently in South Africa, cannabis was decriminalized for personal use in a private setting. And then what followed on that is basically that cannabis possession and use for children was also decriminalized, and they said that rather following a punitive approach, that we should rather follow a social development approach where we need to look at treating children. So, and then with codeine as well. Codeine, it is a case of cough syrup and in-pain pills are easily available over the counter without a prescription. So basically, based on these findings, is that many of these substances, like for example, nicotine first of all, the impact is overlooked in children. So, and if we go back to colleagues such as who work with the Kandel, who work, and colleagues who have a theory associated with the gateway hypothesis, where it literally states that suggests that the use of less harmful substances such as nicotine can lead to future risk of using more harmful drugs, such as methamphetamine, heroin, and cocaine, and so on. So although the gateway hypothesis is largely criticized, there is still a lot of support for that notion. So nicotine is often overlooked when we start doing or when we do prevention initiatives. Usually prevention initiatives will focus on substances like alcohol and cannabis and more hardcore drugs. But then nicotine will be overlooked, and I mean over-the-counter medications such as codeine is often also not included. So what that tells us is that our prevention initiatives does not meet the target that we should, or does not fit the population's need if we look at the programs that we should develop. So another interesting finding for us was if we look at the age of onset. So basically, what our findings indicated that experimentation and the using of psychoactive substances started at a very young age, sometimes even as young as 8 years old. So, and if you take it that SANCO recorded treatment of children as young as 4 for psychoactive addiction or addiction of psychoactive substances, then this is a scary part. So also what it tells us is that substance consumption increases sharply during early to mid-teen years, peaking at about the age of 13 to 16 years old. And then so mid-adolescence is a very important age to target prevention strategies. Now in South Africa, what happens is often our prevention strategies, we start targeting children at secondary school level. Now secondary school level is about from 14 years to 18 years. That's too late, because many of the children already started using substances in primary school from as early as 10, 11, 12, and 13 years old. So targeting prevention initiatives to secondary school level, we're missing our target there. So that's something that we definitely need to look at. So that was another important finding for us. And then if we look at the consumption context, or where consumption takes place, surprisingly for us, what we found is that social context is a significant risk, that sort of we expected. But surprisingly, what we found, that exposure to alcohol and to some extent also drug abuse happens at the family. At the family. So, and also what our studies found is that, so in other words, socialization in terms of substance use happens within family context. So, and the family environment plays a significant role, therefore, to introducing children to substances, and also how often young people consume psychoactive substances. Secondly, socializing with friends was another common context for both alcohol and drug abuse. And then if we look at the alone, what was concerning for us as well is what we found is that at schools, children also need used alcohol and both, and specifically drugs. So that was for us quite concerning. Now, if you look at some comparative insights regarding alcohol and drug use within context, we found that children were more likely to frequently use substances with family members than with friends, but were more likely to abuse substances to the level of intoxication when they are with friends. So the frequency was higher while using it in family context, less with friends, but in terms of the level or of substance use to the level of intoxication, it was more likely to happen within the context of friends and less so within family context. A moderate correlation was also found while using drugs at family functions, and friends was also noted, but it was less significant in comparison to drug use at parties. So the children tend to use drugs with friends, but were more likely to use it within a party or a social setting than at families or friends. Heavy substance use, the point of intoxication, was also strongly linked to parties and environments where excessive consumption of substances is common, such as in South Africa's shebeens, clubs and taverns. Now, shebeens and clubs or taverns are basically drinking establishments within the community, which is often very much underregulated, and due to that, legislation in terms of children's access to alcohol and even other substances are not controlled. What we also found in terms of hubbly bubbly or shisha pipe, what was very interesting is that at such establishments and within the context of friends, that was a very, very common occurrence, that they will have a water pipe or hubbly bubbly or smoke hubbly bubbly, like we like to refer to it. But the problem is first of all, the tobacco, the shisha that they used within the hubbly bubbly is unregulated in South Africa. So there's no indication of how high the nicotine contents within, or any other of substances that's included within the smoking tobacco. And also what we found, and it's an area that we would definitely like to explore in more detail, is that we do not know what do they smoke in that, because I mean you can do mandrax, because mandrax and cannabis are often smoked together in South Africa, as well as cannabis and any other substance that you can smoke can be then introduced to children via hubbly bubbly, which I often view as very innocent because I think it's not harmful. So then, like I said, heavy substance use to the point of intoxication was also moving to party environments and yes, like I said, in clubs and so on in South Africa. So what we also found is that that alcohol consumption at Sabines or taverns contributed significantly to excessive drinking, and the moderate correlation was also found by shebeens and taverns in relation to the use of psychoactive substances. Alarming finding, which I alluded to earlier, is that there was a moderate link between alcohol consumption at schools and then also, but notably, consumption of drugs at schools. So what was very interesting for me is I've got a friend who's a teacher, and when I told her about lean and codeine and so on, and she said, now suddenly she understands why the children, so many children have cough syrup with them, codeine containing cough syrup. And suddenly she realized, but it's not as innocent as it looks. And it's absolutely prevalent in schools, and at the moment also cannabis smoking, it's sort of the new habit of, instead, I don't know in Turkey, but in South Africa we always joke, the children will go around the back of the school and then they will smoke cigarettes. And the habit has changed there, that instead of cigarettes, they will now start smoking cannabis. So that's some of the things that we've picked up that is quite concerning for us in South Africa. So then also solitary substance use was found that there is a moderate link to excessive drinking while being alone, while significant correlation was found indicating the potential for deeper addiction and more children using psychoactive drugs while being alone. So moving on to the consumption reasons. So here what we do is, as I explained at the beginning, is that we had to, our sample group literally consisted of children who use the substances and those who do not. And what was very nice regarding this finding is that we could do a comparative analysis between the motivating factors, and in the case of non-use, children that do not use substances, their perceptions regarding the motivating factors associated with the use of psychoactive substances. So when respondents were asked to motivate why children use psychoactive substances, different reasons were seen clearly between the children who use substances and those who do not. In a comparative analysis between users and the perceptions of non-users, curiosity, to know how it feels, stand out as the strongest motivator for substance users, while peer influence, because my friends use it, were identified as a leading reason for substance use by non-substance using participants. So that the participants who use substances said that they use it because they wanted to know how it feels and curious, while the children who did not use substances said that children use substances because their friends use it. So there's already there a difference in opinion. So both groups cited using to cope with stress as a strong reason and motivator for why they use psychoactive substances. And but it ranked higher for substance users, indicated they might turn to substances more readily in stressful environments or as a coping mechanism. Substance users rated it is fun to use higher, suggesting they find more immediate enjoyment in substance use, whereas non-substance users mentioned it is cool to use. Again, reflecting a significant, the significant impact of societal perceptions about substance use. So there again, there was a little bit of a difference. Both group ranks to feel good as a reason, but interestingly, it scored as less important for substance users and slightly more important for non-users. So in conclusion, these findings indicate that while both groups are influenced by their peers and the desire to experience substances, substance users place more importance on the direct experiences and using drugs as a coping mechanism. In contrast, non-substance users are more influenced by social perceptions and trends, and view that as a motivating reason why children will start using substances. But it's important to note the opinions of both groups, because again, if you want to develop a prevention strategy, that strategy must cater for both children who do not use substances or never experimented substances, as well as those who started to experiment substances. So this is something definitely that we will have to have a look at and consider when we look at our prevention strategies. So what I did basically is I used the R&R, or the risk, needs and responsibility model to look at our findings. And first of all, the risk that we identified, and here I'm specifically focusing on the most prevalent substances that we found that children use, namely alcohol, nicotine, cannabis, and codeine. So the first risk that we found is accessibility and social acceptability of these substances. The second one was that cannabis specifically is becoming more readily accessible in South African society due to the change in legislation. And obviously associated with that is because it's readily available and it is decriminalized. Children say, but then it can't be harmful. So we think that we definitely need to explore what is the impact of the change in legislation and how it impacts children's cannabis consumption. Codeine in turn is, like I said, readily available over the counter as cough syrups and a pain relief medication without prescription, and therefore also often viewed as not being harmful. So the study also indicated that access to these substances can often be obtained through family members and social settings, from shops and social establishments where enforcement of the legal age limits might be lax. Additional peer pressure and the desire to fit in with peers can lead to experimentation and regular use of these substances. So also a risk that was quite prominent is the social cultural acceptance of substance use. I don't know, in South Africa specific, alcohol is literally associated with every festivity, like birthdays, weddings, and even funerals, which is not a festivity. But alcohol is a very large part of our cultural heritage, and also to some extent, it is a rite of passage for many children that they know when you're 18 you can legally buy alcohol, and for them, often boys, it will be the first thing that they say, I'm now 18 and I can buy alcohol legally. So it's absolutely, it's social culturally accepted. And within communities, cannabis also forms a part of many of our communities. So the social cultural acceptance of the substances is something that we definitely need to address within our prevention strategies, but also with the family members and the parents and school environments to tell them, what do we teach our children about responsible use of substances. Then, so the other thing that was very interesting is also that the perceptions and the support for the use of psychoactive substances is portrayed within media, music, movies, it's glamorized. So that also adds to why children use substances. And very interesting for us, the sweet taste. If you look at all these substances, alcohol is sweet, vaping liquid, sweet, shisha, tobacco, sweet, codeine, mixed in lean, cold drink is sweet. So the sweetness and the taste is very pleasurable for the children. And also what we find is that sweetness is sort of associated with sweets and it's innocent. So they do not view it as a harmful substance then. So the enjoyable flavors, the attractive packaging, and contribute, as well as the social and cultural allure of these substances, contributes to making it more frequently used by children, or it's a risk factor associated with childhood psychoactive substance use. The danger of these substances lies in the initial pleasurable mild effect, because if you look at these substances, all have initial very pleasurable mild effect associated with relaxation, euphoria, and it makes it appealing for use in social context and for stress relief. And this then gradually leads to repeated use and eventually resulting in dependence. So that is sort of a stream where you get from innocent experimentation to luring the child in and ending up with addiction. So the needs that we identified is, first of all, the most important one is accurate data. We need to do, and that I will discuss a little bit later as well, what we plan to do. We need to get accurate data to understand exactly what is going on within our communities, which substances our children use, and what is the risk and the trigger factors associated with the use of substances. And then the second one is early intervention. The development of life skills, responsible decision-making, and healthy coping strategies. In the conference that I attended in Turkey, it was like this brain moment for me is where one of the presentations spoke of the use of bibliotherapy, books, reading, stories, narratives, in terms of, and the talk was specifically focusing on teaching a child about their bodies and preventing sexual victimization. And I thought, but wow, why can't we use stories in the same way already at preschool level and start teaching children about responsible use of substances and addiction and so on, instead of waiting till secondary school. So that was just one of the thoughts that I had. So, and to increase responsivity, we said that interventions should be developed to be age and context specific and appropriate. For example, thank you very much. Yeah, this is needed. I was telling the colleagues, not from South Africa, the colleagues from South Africa will understand this. It's winter at the moment in South Africa. So this heat is absolutely, I look permanently as I'm showering. So, but to continue, in terms of the need or the responsivity that we said, that we have to develop age appropriate and context specific intervention strategies. So, generally, strategies are developed by professionals and adults. Why don't we use the children when we start developing the strategies so that they can give us insight and it might then be more effective? So we also need to develop strategies that within multiple component programs addressing various aspects such as substance use prevention, education, skills development, and environmental change. Very important programs need to be evaluated to determine their effectivity. And what's also important is we need to include the correct information in programs. And in South Africa, what we tend to use is we use the big red and we tell children that don't use substances because you're going to overdose. And children are clever. They read, they've got access to the internet, and they know that the chance or that research shows you that you cannot overdose on cannabis. So when you tell the child, don't smoke cannabis or don't use cannabis, you're going to overdose, then they sit there and they smile like, you're lying to me. You lose trust. So use accurate information when you develop programs, and don't underestimate children's intelligence, because if you're going to give them information specifically in this rich environment where we are living now, where the information is at the tip of their fingertips, you're going to lose them and the program is not going to be effective. And then lastly, that the programs should be accessible and inclusive regarding children of all socioeconomic standards. So I want to end off by saying that the project that and findings that I presented to you at the moment offers a mere glimpse of what we found. And like I said, that the study is definitely not generalizable. The exciting part is that this is sort of the beginning of our journey. Now, if you look at there, I want to share this little African proverb with you, which says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So the reason why I included this is that what I'm doing at the moment is my start of my journey to go together with other colleagues. And I must admit that the research study at the beginning, working with Sanka, is basically, it was very humbling and rewarding for me because it started to introduce me to more the deeper understanding of childhood substance use, but also the visit to Turkey from the conference that I attended in the Cultural University to meeting at the Baha Clinic with colleagues there, and there's possibility of doing very exciting further research. For me specifically at that clinic, what stood out is where instead of, in South Africa, what we tend to do is we've got prevention strategy, or we've got clinics that deals with addiction. While the Bahar Clinic, I think, Bahar, that's the pronunciation. Clinic, basically, they created a safe space where people with substance addiction problems can come and they can just be there and be out of the environment. And by creating them, using art therapy and all the other activities, draw them in, and then at the end where they realize that I've got to change my world, and then willingly admit to treatment. So that was for me a very interesting thing that I picked up. And I think in terms of your legislation, we've got it sort of, I compare it to diversion system. I don't know if it's used in, if it's used nationally. I still have to find out where, if a person has is caught with under the influence of substances, that they've got to have a test, and after 2-3 tests, what we will call diversion, that the case is then withdrawn. So that for me is also a very interesting thing that I would like to explore, and how we can perhaps incorporate in South Africa. And then yes, I'm looking forward to learning from you here, to basically in terms of what other trends there are and what we can do. But the bottom line is that when we go together, we can do research to make a difference. So that is basically from my side. If you want additional information, or you're more than welcome to reach out and contact me. Any postgraduate students who want to connect, you're more than welcome as well. I love working with postgraduate students, so you're more than welcome to contact me.
I'm just going to tell about the situation, current situation in Turkey and also in Europe. I'm sure that we have a pandemic on addiction now since for the last 10 years. And actually, it's not so surprising. Epicurus says that we all follow pleasure and we all avoid pain. Since birth, that's a normal thing, but some pleasure turns into pain, and we have just some mind to just forecast these things. So if there are substances, people will use it. So the first part of the prevention is just stopping the production. But that's not our part of business as physicians. So we should think about how people will not gain and will not require. So there is a drug crisis. 36,000 people moved to 128,000 people in 7 years. Number of delinquent individuals per year due to crimes related to substances in Turkey in 7 years. That's a lot move since for the last 10 years. And one in third of whole delinquent individuals are due to crimes related to substance in Turkey. That's pretty much. And this is about the epidemiology of people seeking for treatment. And cannabis moves the first one, and opioids are following. Amphetamines and steroids are moving on. But the thing is, opioids are not on the rise. They are just stable, but methamphetamines and the others are just moving on. So let me start with cannabis. Cannabis is no, not the same as the older or the traditional ones. The traditional cannabis had 2 or 4% THC component, which is the active psychoactive component. But now cannabis on current market has 20 to 28%. So this is not natural, actually. And so psychosis and other complications are moving on. And a bigger crisis is waiting for us, I think, because of these decriminalization policies all over the Europe and also the world. How many years did South Africa decriminalize? 2 or 3 years, something like that, I remember.
Yes, it's not a lot. It's quite new. I think it's 2022 thereabouts. Perhaps a little bit earlier. But our legislation is still not formalized. So there's a lot of gray areas in terms of how many grams a person might have, what you define a private area as, because it's, for adults it is the use of cannabis for recreational purposes within a private space. But what you define as a private space is a car a private space, is a club a private space, is a house a private space.
Hotel.
Is a hotel a private space. And then with the and then following on, as I said, because there was a place where they said, but you cannot decriminalize it for adults if it's still criminal for children. Yes. And then they decriminalized that, and I think that we've got a very strong constitution, a very strong rights-based society. And the original case that said, but not allowing us to smoke cannabis is against our religion. And the Constitution says you've got a right to practice your religions. And that was basically why the decriminalization happened.
And we have just data from Europe and USA, which states have more accidents and have more psychosis and which states do not. So the data is just open for everyone, but the decriminalization process is continuing moving on, and that will be a very important problem for all the world, actually.
You say psychosis maybe from decriminalization, but as you said, as it functions, the cannabis cannabinoids are changed, and the psychosis is not from THC increases, because antipsychotic cannabinoids are much lower, but THC is much higher. So that's
when I was in Netherlands for PhD, one of my professors said that if you just came here to smoke cannabis, just find all the ones. If you smoke the current ones, it's really it's problem.
The new stuff that's good, synthetic stuff that's
And what is one of my studies, that's a statistical thing that I'm not going to go in detail, but if you say, if we stop using cannabis in Izmir, we can say that 1/4 of all first episode psychosis patients will not occur. That's a very important part, and we just made this in 2,185 people, representative of Izmir. And that's one of the most important modifiable risk factors for psychosis. We cannot prevent genetics, but we can prevent psychosis by stopping cannabis use or reducing it. And as you see, that's a data from Europe, and that's from different cities of Europe. As you see, London, Amsterdam, and Paris has the much higher psychosis risk as with prevalence of daily cannabis use. And that's just following the use of cannabis follows the first episode psychosis risk. So, and the potency of cannabis use also is very associated with psychosis risk. So that's a big risk is waiting for psychiatrists, looks like. And cannabis is on the run in 24 EU countries. Prevalence of cannabis use is 17%. And emergency service application and treatment seeking are also increasing. And emerging trends in synthetic cannabinoids is just, have you heard about it? Lots of people use it by impregnated into paper and in book paste. So that's, I think, could be a very important part for schools also, because children can take synthetic cannabinoids to school by impregnated papers. So also this is also familiar in prisons or the other stuff. And delta 8 THC, it's not so common for now, but can be because it's hard to detect. And cocaine is on the run. That is the part of Europe that is from EMCDDA report. And as you see, most of the Europe has increasing cocaine use rates. Actually, cocaine was used in America, South and North America, but now it's also a problem in Europe. And the price is also getting lower, and the increase is very forward and straight. Methamphetamine crisis is all over the world. That's one of the top causes of substance-related deaths with opioids now in Turkey, and it's data from Istanbul, and you see that's just in 3 years, just very long. And we also see it as a physician on the on daily practice, and that is all parts are red, that meaning increasing. Some very low place as green. And it's really Ostrava, Prague. These are actually these was using methamphetamine for years, but our cities, Istanbul and Adana, just moved on here. It's really and in EMCDDA report, Belgium, Germany, Spain, and Turkey are the novel emerging countries, has been written in methamphetamine. That's a methamphetamine laboratory in, I think, in Istanbul. And do you have pregabalin crisis? Okay, as you have a codeine crisis in South Africa, we also have now pregabalin crisis. Medication, that's a medication for epilepsy, neuropathic pain, and generalized anxiety disorder. It's commonly used now in black markets, and typical abuse is just one blister. And when you write pregabalin tablets on internet, as you see, how high is pregabalin? You see in Google. And just it uses as avoidance that's blocking neurotransmitter release, which makes you feel the pain, both mentally and also physically. So people use it to release the pain, but the mental pain is not so bad pain. We should also feel it. And pregabalin craving is euphoria, number needed to treat is 9, is a huge, and also it's in pre-marketing studies. We knew it's addictive, but we used it. And people say they use it for relaxation, and people say they use it for increased empathy and talk techniques. And we noticed it in 2019. So prescription decreased, but the black market is now on the rise. What about the ketamine? It's not now so common in Turkey. but I have some patients using ketamine, but it's on the run in Europe, so it will come to Turkey. It's used for analgesia, short-term anesthesia, and we also use it. But if you reduce the dose by 20%, that brings reduction, that brings euphoria, sorry. And it's commonly used for sexual assaults. What about the change by weekdays and weekends? That's important as which part is addictive and commonly used every day and which part is just recreational, just for used in discos and other part. As we expect, MDMA, ecstasy, ketamine increases at weekends, but methamphetamine and cannabis is stable throughout the week. And what about the synthetic catinones? There is record trade in Europe. Do we have this problem also in South Africa?
No,
Mephedrone and the other stuff?
Yeah, no.
No. Also, we don't have it so much in Turkey. I have patients, just I think 10, not more. But it is really in Italy, in France. My patients are also coming to Italy and going back. So it's very close to come to this part of Europe. And what about the change in nicotine use? Yes, in Europe, nicotine use is decreasing, but not use is not decreasing. Smoking is decreasing, vaping is increasing. And what about the gambling? Yes, gambling is a very huge problem. It's like half of my daily practice is gambling disorder. So online is something that 10 years ago people used to go to just illegal places or to North Cyprus or other places. But it takes time to go there. But when it's online, it's just 10 seconds. Thank you for your attention.